The observation deck of the Galactic Council Station stretched across 3 kilometers of transparent crystal, offering a view of the gas giant below. Commander Day 1 stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the swirling storms on the planet's surface. Behind him, Ambassador Nari reviewed documents on her datapad, her expression calm despite the tension in the air. They had been summoned. That word carried weight in galactic politics. The Council did not invite. It did not request. It summoned, and species answered or faced consequences. The doors opened with a soft hiss. A tall reptilian figure entered, scales gleaming under the artificial lights. Counselor Vex's tar moved with predatory grace, his eyes fixed on the 2 humans. "The Council is ready for you," he said, his translator rendering his words in perfect standard. "Try not to embarrass your species too badly." Nari smiled politely. "We'll do our best." They followed Vextar through corridors designed for beings much larger than humans. The architecture was ancient, built by civilizations that had crossed the stars when Earth was still figuring out agriculture. Every surface reminded visitors that humanity was young, inexperienced, barely worth noticing. The council chamber was massive. 47 species had representatives present, each sitting in their designated section. Some breathed oxygen like humans. Others existed in sealed environments filled with methane or liquid suspensions. The diversity was stunning, though Day 1 had seen it many times before. High Chancellor Mordak presided from the central platform. The ancient insectoid being was over 300 years old, a veteran of countless political battles. His compound eyes glittered as he watched the humans enter. "Ambassador Nari, Commander Day 1, humanity stands before this council to answer serious concerns." Mordak's voice resonated through the chamber. "Your species has been increasing military production, building warships, training soldiers. This is concerning behavior for such a new member of our community." Nari stepped forward. "Humanity takes its defense seriously, Chancellor. We've made no secret of our military development." "Defense?" Vextar laughed, the sound harsh. "You've been in space for barely 50 years. What do you know of defense? Of warfare? The Council has maintained peace for 10,000 years through strength and unity. Your primitive efforts threaten that balance." Day 1 remained still, but his jaw tightened slightly. Nari touched his arm gently, a silent message to stay calm. "The Ravager swarm approaches the outer colonies." Mordak continued. "Intelligence suggests they will attack within 6 months. The Council is assembling a defense force. All member species must contribute." "Humanity is prepared to contribute," Nari said. "Are you?" Another counselor spoke up, this one from an avian species. Commander Thelvon stood, wings folded against his back. "The Ravagers are unlike anything your species has encountered. They are relentless, vicious. They have destroyed civilizations that had mastered space travel for millennia before your ancestors left their caves." "We understand the threat," Day 1 said quietly. "Do you?" Vextar leaned forward. "Your military uses kinetic weapons, bullets and explosives. Technology we abandoned thousands of years ago. You have no telepathic coordination, no warrior caste, no genetic engineering for combat. You are builders and merchants, playing at being soldiers." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Day 1 could see it in their faces, across dozens of alien species. They looked at humanity the way adults might look at children playing with toy weapons. Nari straightened. "Humanity may be young, but we are not helpless. Our military capabilities may surprise you." Vextar's laugh echoed again. "Surprise us? Very well. The Council requests a demonstration. Show us this human military you're so proud of. We have combat simulators here. Prove that humanity deserves to stand alongside species that have fought wars before your planet had multicellular life." Mordak raised one clawed appendage. "Counselor Vextar, that is perhaps too harsh." "Is it?" Vextar looked around the chamber. "We're about to face the Ravagers. We need to know if humanity will be an asset or a liability. Better to know now than when lives are at stake. Other counselors nodded. The sentiment was clear. Humanity needed to prove itself. Nari and Day One exchanged glances. A conversation passed between them in that moment. Unspoken, but perfectly understood. This was both an insult and an opportunity. We accept, Day One said. Give us 48 hours to prepare. 48 hours? Thelvan sounded surprised. Commander, the simulation systems are complex. It takes most species weeks to properly integrate their combat doctrine into the parameters. 48 hours will be sufficient, Day One replied. Vextar's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. Excellent. We'll configure the simulation to match Ravager tactics. Standard engagement parameters. A fleet action, followed by ground combat. Your forces against a typical Ravager assault wave should be very educational. He smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. For everyone. The council session ended shortly after. As Nari and Day One left the chamber, they could hear the buzz of conversation behind them. The aliens were already discussing the upcoming demonstration. Some were placing bets on how quickly the humans would fail. In the corridor, Nari finally spoke. They think we're fools. They think we're children. Day One corrected. There's a difference. Will 48 hours be enough? More than enough. Day One pulled out his communicator. General Taemin is already in system. He arrived yesterday with the demonstration force. We just needed the official invitation. Nari smiled slightly. You planned for this. We've been planning for this since we joined the council. Every species here has underestimated us. Vextar just gave us a platform to change that narrative. He began composing a message. The general will be pleased. He's been wanting to show them what we can really do. They walked through the station toward the human quarters. Around them, aliens went about their business, barely glancing at the two humans. Humanity was an afterthought to most of them, a young species that had gotten lucky with faster-than-light travel. Not a real threat. Not a real power. That was about to change. In her quarters that evening, Nari reviewed the simulation parameters that Vextar had sent. They were harsh. The Ravager forces would outnumber human units 3-1. The terrain would be hostile. The enemy would have every advantage. Vextar wanted humanity to fail spectacularly. Her communicator chimed. General Taemin's face appeared on the screen. He was older than Day One, with gray at his temples and lines around his eyes. A career soldier who had seen more combat than most aliens could imagine. Ambassador, I've received the parameters. They're brutal, Nari said. They're perfect. Taemin smiled. Let them stack the deck. Let them make it as hard as they want. When we still win, there will be no excuses. No way for them to dismiss what they see. And if we lose, we won't. Taemin's confidence was absolute. They're judging us by their standards. They think because we don't have telepathy or warrior castes that we're weak. They have no idea what we actually bring to the battlefield. Nari nodded slowly. 48 hours, General. We'll be ready in 24. Use the extra day to build anticipation. It's time the galaxy learned something important about humanity. What's that? We've been at war with ourselves for 10,000 years. We've had guns for centuries. Nuclear weapons for generations. We've fought in jungles and deserts, oceans and mountains, even in space around our own world. We've mastered every type of combat imaginable. His expression grew serious. These aliens have had peace for millennia. They've forgotten what real warfare looks like. We're about to remind them. One quote. End quote. One quote. One quote. The transmission ended. Nari sat back, looking out at the stars. In 2 days, everything would change. The galaxy would finally see humanity not as children, but as what they truly were. Warriors born from a world that had forged them in endless conflict. Survivors who had turned their greatest weakness into their greatest strength. The demonstration would shock them all. The Council's Military Analysis Center hummed with activity. Dozens of species had sent their military experts to observe and analyze the upcoming human demonstration. Commander Thelvon stood at the central holographic display, reviewing data on human military capabilities. What he saw disappointed him. Their largest warship masses only 200,000 tons, he said to his assistant. Our scout ships are larger. They use chemical propulsion for missiles. Chemical? We stopped using that technology before their ancestors discovered fire. His assistant, a younger avian named Kelsor, nodded. Their energy weapons are barely functional. Low output, short range, and their armor is just layered metals. No energy shielding at all. Across the room, Counselor Vextar reviewed similar data with his military advisors. Look at their ground forces. Individual soldiers carrying their own weapons. No psychic coordination network. No genetic enhancements. They're essentially unchanged from their primitive ancestors. They'll be slaughtered. One of his advisors hesitated. Sir, their historical records show extensive military experience, fighting themselves. Vextar laughed. Tribal conflicts. Meaningless squabbles over resources and territory. That's not warfare. That's barely organized violence. He gestured at the data. Real warfare requires precision, coordination, genetically bred warrior castes working in perfect harmony, telepathic command structures that respond instantly. These humans have none of that. In another section of the center, military scholars from various species debated the coming demonstration. A methane-breathing philosopher named Gorval floated in his containment sphere, addressing several colleagues. Consider their development, Gorval said. Most species achieve unity before reaching the stars. They form a single government, a single purpose. Humanity still has over 200 separate nations on their home world. They can barely agree among themselves. Chaos, agreed a crystalline being whose name translated roughly as clear thought. How can they possibly coordinate a military operation when they can't even unify their own planet? It's actually quite sad, added another scholar. Such potential, wasted on internal conflict. Imagine what they could achieve if they had spent those centuries cooperating instead of fighting. The consensus was clear. Humanity was disorganized, primitive, and hopelessly outmatched. The demonstration would be a formality. A quick lesson in why young species should listen to their elders. General Taemin arrived at the station aboard a human transport ship. The vessel was small, by galactic standards, almost comically so. Alien observers noted its simple design, its basic weapons, its lack of any impressive technology. When the general disembarked, they were further disappointed. Taemin wore a simple uniform, dark blue with minimal decorations. No ceremonial armor. No genetic enhancements visible. He looked like an ordinary member of his species, perhaps slightly older and more weathered than average. Behind him came his staff. Lieutenant Bo-Ra was young, perhaps 25 in Earth years. She carried a standard data pad and wore the same simple uniform. Captain Jinwoo and Major Hanul followed, equally unimpressive by alien standards. That's their general? Someone whispered. He looks so normal. No cybernetic enhancements, noted another observer. No battle scars. No armor. Are we sure he's actually a military commander? Taemin heard the whispers. He ignored them. He had heard similar comments before, on Earth, from commanders who underestimated him. Those commanders had learned. These aliens would too. Bo-Ra set up their equipment in the simulation chamber. The room was vast, designed to accommodate multiple species simultaneously. Holographic projectors lined the walls and ceiling, capable of creating combat scenarios of incredible complexity. Parameters received, sir, Bo-Ra reported. They've loaded standard Ravager assault patterns. Fleet strength estimated at 300 vessels. Ground forces at approximately 50,000 units. Against? Taemin asked. 100 human vessels. 15,000 ground troops. Bo-Ra looked up. Sir, they're giving us a 3-to-1 disadvantage. Standard odds for an attacking force facing prepared defenders, Taemin said calmly. Except, we're supposed to be the defenders. They've reversed the ratio. He smiled slightly. Counselor Vex Tar wants to embarrass us. Can we do it? Asked Jinwoo. The captain commanded the ground forces for the demonstration. Can we win against 3-to-1 odds in a simulated battle? Taemin looked at his officers. What do you think? Hanul grinned. I think we've faced worse in real combat. Agreed. Taemin turned to Bo-Ra. Accept the parameters. No modifications. We fight it exactly as they designed it. Word spread quickly through the station that the humans had accepted the unfavorable parameters without complaint. This confirmed what most aliens already believed. The humans simply didn't understand what they were facing. In the council chambers, a meeting was underway. High Chancellor Mordak addressed the gathered representatives. The human demonstration will occur tomorrow. I must ask, has Counselor Vex Tar been too harsh with the parameters? Vex Tar stood. Chancellor, we face a real threat in the Ravagers. We cannot coddle humanity simply because they are young. They must prove they can contribute meaningfully to our defense. If they cannot handle a simulation, they certainly cannot handle real combat. The parameters seem designed to humiliate rather than test, argued a representative from the Velen Collective. 3-to-1 odds against? That's not a fair assessment. War is not fair. Vex Tar replied. The Ravagers will not give us fair odds. If humanity wants to be treated as equals, they must prove themselves under realistic conditions. Thelvon stood. I've reviewed human military history. They have experience, though primitive. Perhaps we should give them a more balanced scenario. Their experience is against themselves, Vex Tar said dismissively. Fighting with crude weapons over small territories. That's not comparable to galactic warfare. They've never faced a real enemy. Never coordinated fleet actions across light years. Never managed combined arms operations on an alien world. He looked around the chamber. Tomorrow will be educational for everyone. The humans will see why they need to learn from us. And we will see exactly how much training they'll require before they're useful. The vote was taken. The parameters stood unchanged. 3-to-1 odds against humanity. Unfavorable terrain. Maximum difficulty. That evening, alien officers gathered in observation lounges to discuss the upcoming demonstration. Bets were being placed openly now. How long would humanity last? 10 minutes? 20? Would their fleet break formation immediately or hold together for a while? I give them 15 minutes, one officer said. They'll try the standard wall formation. It'll fail, and they'll retreat. No retreat allowed in the parameters, another pointed out. Fight to the last unit. Vex Tar made sure of that. Then 10 minutes before their command structure collapses, in a quieter corner, a young tactician from the Velen Collective studied human historical records. Her name was Sarlun, and unlike most of her colleagues, she was curious rather than dismissive. The humans had fought thousands of wars, not just conflicts, but actual nation-against-nation wars. They had developed weapons of incredible destructiveness, used them, and somehow survived. Their history was soaked in blood, but they had kept advancing, kept learning. One passage caught her attention. A human general named someone she couldn't pronounce had written, "Victory belongs not to the largest army, but to the army that makes the fewest mistakes." Another human military thinker had said, "All warfare is based on deception." And another, "In war, the moral is to the physical, as 3 is to 1. These weren't the thoughts of primitive warriors. These were sophisticated military philosophies developed over centuries of hard experience. Sarlun wondered if perhaps her colleagues were missing something important. She decided to watch the demonstration with an open mind. In the human quarters, Taemin's team prepared. They reviewed the simulation parameters, studied the Ravager tactics, and planned their response. Their preparation looked nothing like what the aliens expected. There was no ritual, no genetic synchronization, No psychic linking. They simply talked, debated, adjusted plans, and prepared their equipment. Remember, Taemin told his team, they're expecting us to fight like them. Formation warfare. Direct confrontation. Strength against strength. We won't do that. What will we do? Asked a young officer. What we've always done, Taemin replied. We'll improvise. Adapt. Use the terrain. Strike where they're weak. Avoid where they're strong. Deceive them. Confuse them. Make them react to us instead of executing their plan. He looked at each face. We'll fight like humans. And that will be enough. The team dispersed to their quarters. Tomorrow would change everything, though most of the galaxy didn't know it yet. Outside, stars shone in the endless dark. Somewhere out there, the Ravagers were coming. But before that threat arrived, humanity had to prove something simpler, yet more profound. They had to prove they belonged. Not as students or children, but as equals. Warriors who had earned their place through 10,000 years of the hardest teacher possible. Themselves. The simulation chamber filled with observers. Every seat was taken. Representatives from all 47 council species attended, along with hundreds of military officers, scholars, and curious civilians. The humans had become a spectacle, entertainment before they faced real danger. Counselor Vex Tar sat in the prime viewing location, satisfaction clear on his reptilian features. High Chancellor Mordock occupied the central platform, his ancient compound eyes fixed on the massive holographic display. Commander Thelvon sat nearby, datapad ready to record observations. In the control center below, General Taemin stood with his command team. Lieutenant Bo-Ra manned the communication console. Captain Jin Woo commanded the ground forces. Major Hanul led the fleet elements. A dozen other officers filled supporting roles. Simulation ready, announced the station's AI. Combatants may assume starting positions. The holographic display activated. A planetary system materialized, showing a colony world with 3 moons. The human fleet appeared near the 4th planet, exactly where the parameters placed them. In contrast, the Ravager forces emerged from simulated FTL at the edge of the system. A massive swarm of 300 vessels. Murmurs rippled through the observation deck. The Ravager fleet was enormous. A dark cloud of angular ships designed for one purpose: destruction. Simulation begins in 10 seconds, the AI announced. Taemin took a deep breath. All units, implement Echo Protocol. Good luck. The countdown hit 0. The Ravager fleet immediately accelerated toward the colony world, moving in their characteristic swarm pattern. Alien observers nodded knowingly. Standard Ravager tactics. Overwhelming force, direct approach, brutal efficiency. They expected the human fleet to form a defensive wall, concentrating firepower to meet the assault. Every military doctrine in the galaxy taught the same basic principle. When outnumbered, concentrate your forces and make the enemy pay for every kilometer. The human fleet split apart. What are they doing? Someone in the observation deck asked. 100 human ships, divided into 20 groups of 5. Instead of forming a wall, they scattered across the system, like seeds in wind. They're breaking formation. Vextar stood, incredulous. They'll be destroyed. Piecemeal. This is madness. But the humans didn't act like a broken force. Each 5-ship group moved with purpose, taking positions throughout the system. Some dove toward the gas giant, others positioned behind moons. Several groups accelerated away from the planet entirely. The Ravager fleet, programmed with standard tactical responses, adjusted course toward the largest concentration of human ships. They found it near the 2nd moon, where 15 ships had gathered. Finally some sense, Vextar muttered. They're forming a defense at the moon. The Ravager swarm descended on that position. 200 ships converged, weapons charging, ready to annihilate the human defenders. The human ships fled. Cowards! Shouted someone in the audience. But as the Ravagers pursued, something changed. The human ships that had positioned behind the gas giant now appeared on the Ravager fleet's flank. Without warning, they opened fire. Not at the ships, at the gas giant itself. Missiles struck the planet's atmosphere, specifically targeting a massive storm system. The explosions were tiny compared to the planet's size, but they were precisely placed. The storm, already unstable, erupted. A jet of plasma erupted outward, catching a dozen Ravager ships. "They're using the environment!" Thelvon leaned forward, his academic interest suddenly genuine. "I've never seen anyone weaponize a gas giant's weather patterns." The Ravager fleet scrambled, trying to reform. But now, the human groups that had accelerated away from the planet returned, coming from above and below the system's ecliptic plane. They struck at the edges of the Ravager formation, targeting command vessels, then vanishing before the enemy could respond. Vextar stared at the display. They're not following any standard doctrine." "No," Mordak said quietly. "They're not. The human ships never stood still. They never formed up into a traditional battle line. They hit and ran, used terrain, created crossfires, and constantly kept the Ravagers reacting instead of executing their programmed assault. When Ravager groups broke off to chase individual human squadrons, they found themselves led into traps. Human ships waiting in the rings of the gas giant opened fire as the Ravagers passed through the debris field. Ships hiding in the shadow of moons struck as enemies rounded the horizon. Bo-Ra's voice remained calm throughout, coordinating the chaos. "Echo 7, Ravager squadron breaking toward you. Echo 3, that's your window. Echo 12, hold position, let them come to you." How is she coordinating them? Thelvon wondered aloud. Without telepathy, without a hive mind, how are they maintaining this level of complexity? On the display, the answer was becoming clear. Each human squadron acted independently, but within a larger plan. They trusted their commanders to make decisions without asking permission. When opportunities appeared, they took them. When danger threatened, they adapted. The battle shifted to the colony world. 50,000 Ravager ground units descended in drop pods, expecting to face 15,000 human troops in defensive positions. Instead, they found nothing. The human ground forces had abandoned the colony's central city. As the Ravagers landed, confused by the lack of resistance, Captain Jin Woo's forces struck from unexpected directions. Small teams of humans appeared on rooftops, in sewers, behind terrain features. They fired, destroyed Ravager units, then disappeared before the enemy could respond. The Ravagers, programmed for frontal assault, struggled to adapt to an enemy that refused to stand and fight. "Guerrilla warfare," Sarloon whispered from her seat. She had studied human military history. "They're using guerrilla warfare against a conventional army." One Ravager unit cornered a human squad in a building. The humans retreated upward, floor by floor. When the Ravagers followed, the building exploded. The humans had booby-trapped it and escaped through tunnels. Another Ravager force pursued humans into the colony's industrial district. The humans led them into a factory complex, then sealed the doors and filled the area with toxic gas from the industrial processes. The Ravagers died without the humans firing a shot. Jin Woo's voice came through clear. "Echo ground actual. Enemy commander unit identified. Requesting precision. Strike. In orbit." Major Hanul's remaining ships had cleared enough space to target the surface. Strike confirmed. Impact in 15 seconds. The Ravager ground commander, a massive unit coordinating the entire assault, exploded in a flash of kinetic energy. Without central coordination, the Ravager ground forces fell into confusion. The humans, already decentralized, actually became more effective. Each squad continued operating independently, picking apart the disorganized Ravagers piece by piece. In space, the battle was reaching its conclusion. The Ravager fleet, reduced to fewer than 100 vessels, finally achieved what it had been trying to do since the battle began. It caught a significant human force in open space. 20 human ships faced 60 Ravager vessels with nowhere to run. The aliens in the observation deck leaned forward. Finally, a proper engagement. Finally, the humans would have to stand and fight by standard rules. The human ships charged directly at the Ravager formation. "Suicide run," Vextar said. They know they've lost that group, but the charging human ships weren't preparing to die. They were carrying every missile they had left. At point-blank range, they released their entire payload. Hundreds of missiles, primitive chemical rockets by galactic standards, filled the space between the fleets. The Ravagers opened fire, destroying most of them. But not all. The missiles that survived didn't target ships. They targeted each other. In a precisely timed sequence, the missiles collided and detonated, creating a massive chain reaction. The explosion was crude, inelegant, wasteful by galactic standards. It was also devastatingly effective. The Ravager formation shattered. Half their remaining ships were destroyed or disabled. The survivors scattered, no longer combat effective. The 20 human ships that had charged in emerged from the fireball on the other side, damaged but functional. "Simulation complete," the AI announced. "Human forces victorious." Time elapsed. 32 minutes. Human casualties, 37%. Enemy casualties, 98%. Absolute silence filled the observation deck. Taemin exhaled slowly. Around him, his team began standing down from combat stations. Bora's hands were shaking slightly from the intensity of coordinating the battle. Jinwoo looked exhausted. Hanul was grinning despite herself. "Well?" Taemin said into the silence. "Are there any questions?" Vextar stood slowly. His earlier confidence was gone. "That was not possible. You were outnumbered, 3-1. The parameters were designed to be impossible." "Nothing is impossible," Taemin replied. "It's just more difficult." Mordak rose from his seat. The ancient chancellor moved to the railing, looking down at the human command team. "You did not fight like any species I have seen in 300 years of life. Your tactics were chaotic, unpredictable. You broke every standard doctrine." "Yes, sir." "How?" Thelvan asked, his earlier skepticism replaced by genuine curiosity. "How did you coordinate such complexity without telepathy? Without genetic programs? Without central control?" Taemin smiled slightly. "With trust, Commander. We trust our people to make the right decisions. We give them mission objectives, not detailed orders. We train them to think, to adapt, to improvise." He gestured to his team. "Every officer here could command independently if needed. Every soldier on the ground could operate alone if necessary. We don't need telepathy because we build understanding through training and shared purpose." "But your tactics," Vextar said, still struggling to comprehend what he had witnessed. "Where did they come from?" "Earth," Taemin replied simply. "We've been fighting ourselves for 10,000 years. Every nation, every culture, every military force developed their own approaches. Guerrilla warfare from our jungles, maneuver warfare from our plains, naval tactics from our oceans, combined arms from our world wars, asymmetric warfare from our modern conflicts." He looked up at the assembled aliens. "We synthesized all of it. Every lesson learned in blood, every innovation born from necessity. That's what you saw here today. 10,000 years of warfare, concentrated into 32 minutes. The observation deck remained silent. What could they say? The humans had just demonstrated something that should have been impossible, and made it look almost easy. Finally, Mordak spoke. "The Council will deliberate on what we have witnessed. Commander Day 1, Ambassador Nari, your demonstration has been most enlightening." As the observers filed out, conversations erupted. Excited voices, shocked voices, analytical voices, all talking over each other. The galaxy had just learned something new. Humanity was not what they seemed. The emergency council session began 6 hours after the demonstration ended. The chamber buzzed, with conversations in dozens of languages. Representatives argued, questioned, and demanded explanations. High Chancellor Mordak called for order 3 times before the assembly quieted. "We have witnessed something unprecedented," Mordak began. "Humanity achieved victory under parameters designed to test their absolute limits. Many of us have questions. The human delegation has agreed to provide clarity." Ambassador Nari stood, flanked by Commander Day 1 and a man wearing civilian clothes. "Thank you, Chancellor. I've brought Dr. Sang Ho, one of humanity's military historians. He can best explain what you saw." Dr. Sang Ho was old even by human standards, his hair completely white, deep lines marking his face. He carried himself with quiet dignity, the manner of someone who had spent a lifetime studying violence and its consequences. "Honored representatives," Sang Ho began, his voice clear despite his age. "You asked how humanity achieved what you saw yesterday. To answer that, I must first tell you about Earth." A holographic display activated, showing humanity's home world. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds, beautiful from space. Earth is a garden world. Sang Ho continued. Perfect for life, but perhaps too perfect. Multiple intelligent species evolved there before us and died out. When humanity emerged, we were not alone. We competed with other predators, other threats. Survival was never guaranteed. The image changed, showing early humans with primitive weapons. We learned to make tools, to hunt in groups, to communicate complex ideas. But Earth is divided by oceans, mountains, and deserts. Human populations separated. Different environments created different cultures. Different cultures developed different solutions to the same problems. Counselor Vex Tar interrupted. All species experience this. Evolution requires variation. But eventually, unity must emerge. Eventually, Sang Ho agreed. But Earth's geography made unity difficult. For thousands of years, human civilizations rose and fell in isolation. Each developed its own methods of warfare, its own tactics, its own innovations. The display showed battles throughout human history. Ancient armies clashing with bronze weapons. Medieval soldiers storming castles. Ships exchanging cannon fire across oceans. "We fought constantly," Sang Ho said quietly. "Not because we were evil or uniquely violent, but because we were separate. Different nations wanted the same resources, the same territories. Conflicts were inevitable." Commander Thelvan spoke up. "This seems tragic. Such waste. If you had unified earlier, you could have reached the stars centuries ago." "Perhaps," Sang Ho acknowledged, "but we would have been weaker. You see, every war taught us lessons. Every conflict drove innovation. When one nation developed a new weapon, others had to adapt or die." He brought up images of a massive conflict. This was our Second World War. Over 100 nations involved. 60 million dead. Nearly 6 years of total warfare across multiple continents and all our oceans. Gasps echoed through the chamber. 60 million? Someone whispered. "From one war?" "One war," Sang Ho confirmed. "But from that horror came innovations in aircraft, naval warfare, combined arms tactics, strategic bombing, amphibious assault, logistical operations, code breaking, and psychological warfare. Both sides pushed technology and tactics to their absolute limits, because losing meant extinction." The images changed again, showing more recent conflicts. We learned guerrilla warfare in jungles, urban warfare in cities, desert warfare in wastelands, mountain warfare in highlands. We fought in every terrain type on our planet. We developed tactics for every possible scenario. But why didn't you stop? Asked a representative from a peaceful species. After the first war, after you saw the cost, why continue? Sang-Ho's expression grew sad. We tried. After every major war, we said never again. We built institutions, signed treaties, created alliances. Sometimes it worked for a while. But we were still separate nations with separate interests. Eventually, conflict returned. He paused, letting that sink in. It was only when we reached space, when we saw Earth from orbit as one world, that unity became possible. When we discovered we weren't alone in the universe, that greater threats existed, we finally achieved what had eluded us for millennia. We formed a unified, planetary government. 50 years ago, Mordak noted. Yes. By galactic standards, we unified yesterday. But by then, we had already spent 10,000 years perfecting warfare. Every tactic you saw in the demonstration came from real battles. Real blood, real sacrifice. Bo-Ra stood from her seat in the gallery. Permission to speak, Chancellor? Mordak gestured assent. I'm Lieutenant Bo-Ra. I coordinated the human forces during the demonstration. What you saw as chaos was actually something we call mission tactics. Each unit knew their objective, but decided how to achieve it themselves. This approach was developed by one of Earth's military forces centuries ago, refined through multiple wars, and eventually adopted by most of our military organizations. She brought up tactical displays. When I said Echo 7, Ravager Squadron breaking toward you, I wasn't telling them what to do. I was giving them information. They decided whether to engage, evade, or set a trap. Each commander made that choice based on their situation, their capabilities, and their judgment. But without central control, Thelvan said. How do you maintain coordination? Through shared understanding, Bo-Ra replied. We train together. We study together. We learn the same principles and the same history. When Captain Jinwoo sees an opportunity on the ground, he knows Major Hanuel will understand and support him. Even without explicit communication, we think similarly because we learned from the same teachers. Commander Daewon added, every species here has strengths we lack. Telepathy, enhanced physiology, hive minds. These are powerful advantages, but they create dependencies. If a telepathic network fails, your forces become confused. If a queen dies, your warriors lose direction. Humans have no such dependencies, Taemin said, standing. Kill my command staff, and the captains take over. Kill the captains, and the sergeants take over. Kill the sergeants, and individual soldiers continue fighting. We're fractally resilient because we're built from the ground up to operate independently. Vex Tar had been quiet for some time, clearly struggling with what he was hearing. Finally, he spoke. Your history is horrific. 60 million dead in one war? Constant conflict for 10,000 years? You speak of it as if it were a necessary evolution, but it sounds like madness. It was madness, Sang-Ho agreed. Absolute madness. We lost brilliant minds, destroyed irreplaceable art, burned entire cities. The cost was unimaginable. He met Vextar's eyes directly. But we paid that cost. We can't undo it. We can only learn from it. And what we learned, at a price you cannot imagine, is how to survive when everything is against us. 04. The chamber fell silent. The weight of human history hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. You asked how we coordinate without telepathy, Daewon said. The answer is communication technology developed through necessity. You asked how we maintain cohesion without hive minds. The answer is trust and training built through shared hardship. You asked how we innovate so quickly. The answer is competition and necessity driving constant improvement. Everything you saw in the demonstration, Taemin added, represents lessons learned in actual combat. The environmental manipulation, learned from naval forces using weather and tides in ocean warfare. The guerrilla tactics, perfected by smaller nations fighting larger ones. The decentralized command, developed when centralized command proved vulnerable to enemy action. The combined arms approach, born from necessity, when specialized forces proved insufficient alone. Nari stood again. Honored Council, humanity does not claim superiority. We recognize your species have advantages we lack. Longer lifespans, greater strength, remarkable abilities, but we offer something you may have forgotten through millennia of peace. We remember what warfare truly demands. Not honor, not glory, but adaptation, sacrifice, and the will to do whatever survival requires. Mordak's compound eyes glittered with ancient intelligence. You have given us much to consider. This council must deliberate. Before we do, Thelvan said, I have one more question. Commander Day 1. You studied our military doctrines. All of them? All that were available in public records, Day 1 confirmed. 43 species tactical approaches. We integrated the best elements into our training. You learned from us? Of course. Why wouldn't we? Your species have been fighting space battles for thousands of years. We've only been in space for decades. We'd be fools not to study your successes and failures. Thelvan looked around the chamber. They studied us, learned from us, then synthesized our knowledge with their own brutal history to create something new, something we never conceived because we never needed to. The question, Mordak said slowly, is what this means for our defense against the Ravagers. The demonstration was impressive, but simulations are not reality. We understand that, Chancellor, Nari said. That's why we're not asking to lead the defense. We're asking to participate as equals. Let our forces fight alongside yours. Let our commanders coordinate with your commanders. Let us prove in real combat what we showed in simulation. And if you fail? Vextar asked, though his earlier hostility had softened. If the Ravagers are different from the simulation? Taman smiled grimly. Then we'll adapt. That's what we do best. We've never faced an enemy we couldn't eventually defeat, even when that enemy was ourselves. The council session ended with no immediate decision. Representatives filed out. Conversations already beginning about what humanity's integration into galactic military operations would mean. In the corridors, small groups of aliens approached the human delegation. Some wanted to discuss tactics. Others wanted to review human military history. A few, like Thelvan, wanted to establish military exchange programs. Late that evening, Vex Tar found Taemin in an observation lounge. The general stood alone, watching the stars through the transparent walls. General, Vex Tar said quietly, I owe you an apology. I underestimated your species. I designed those simulation parameters to embarrass you. Taemin turned. I know, yet you never complained. Never asked for fair terms. Warfare is not fair, Taemin replied, echoing Vex Tar's own words from earlier. We needed to prove we could win even under the worst conditions. Your harsh parameters actually helped us. They gave us no excuse for failure. Vextar was quiet for a moment. Your history is terrifying. All that violence, all that death. How do you live with it? By honoring those who died, Taemin said. By ensuring their sacrifices taught us something. By being good enough, skilled enough, smart enough, that we never waste lives through incompetence or arrogance. He looked back at the stars, and by hoping that maybe, working with species like yours, we can build a future where such sacrifices are no longer necessary. Somewhere in the darkness, the Ravagers were coming, but humanity was ready. And now, perhaps, the galaxy was beginning to understand why. 3 months passed before the Ravagers arrived. Those months transformed the galactic military in ways no one had anticipated. Fleet Admiral Yuna stood on the bridge of the combined fleet's command ship, the Valiant Dawn. The vessel was Velen in design, massive and elegant. But its crew was mixed. Humans worked alongside 3 different alien species, each learning from the others. "Admiral," reported a Velen communications officer named Sarloon. "Outer sensor nets detect Ravager fleet emergence. Multiple points across the sector. None 40. API. Yuna nodded calmly. She was young for such a command, barely 40 in Earth years. But she had proven herself during the integration period. Her ability to coordinate multiple species, each with different capabilities and doctrines, had made her the natural choice to lead the combined forces. "Alert all units. Execute dispersal pattern Tiger 7. The combined fleet began moving. 100 human vessels, 200 Velen ships, 50 heavy Corvan battlecruisers, and hundreds of smaller craft from various species spread across the sector. To traditional eyes, it looked like chaos. But every ship knew exactly where to be. On the surface of the threatened colony world, General Tae-min surveyed defensive preparations. His ground forces had grown significantly. 20,000 human troops now fought alongside 50,000 alien soldiers from a dozen species. Colonel Ki-jun approached, saluting. "Sir, final defensive positions confirmed. The alien contingents are in place." Tae-min studied his tactical display. "How are they adapting to our methods? Better than expected." The Corvan warriors struggled at first with decentralized command, but their officers are learning. The Velen scouts took to infiltration tactics naturally. The crystalline troops from clear-thought species are excellent at holding fortified positions while others maneuver. "Combined arms," Tae-min said with satisfaction. "Each species doing what they do best, but within a coordinated framework. That's what will win this." Above the planet, the Ravagers appeared. Thousands of ships, a dark swarm that blotted out stars. They moved with the same relentless purpose they always had, programmed by their hive intelligence to destroy and consume. Yuna watched them come. Beside her, a Corvan admiral named Corvash rumbled in his deep voice. "They outnumber us 5-1, Admiral. This is worse than intelligence predicted." "Numbers aren't everything," Yuna replied. "Communications. All ships. Execute first strike pattern. Remember your training." The fleet didn't form a wall. Instead, small, mixed groups of ships began launching attacks from multiple angles. Human vessels used their mobility to strike and fade. Velen ships provided precision fire support. Corvan battlecruisers anchored strong points, while smaller craft maneuvered around them. It wasn't perfect. In the first engagement, a mixed squadron moved too aggressively and got caught by Ravager reinforcements. 3 ships were destroyed before others could extract them. Mistakes were made, coordination sometimes failed, and not every tactic worked as planned. But they learned. They adapted. On the ground, the Ravagers began their assault. Drop pods rained from orbit, each containing hundreds of warrior units. The ground shook as they landed around the colony's perimeter. Captain Hai-jin commanded a mixed unit. 50 humans, 75 Velen scouts, and 30 Corvan warriors. Her orders were simple: harass enemy landing zones and prevent them from organizing. "Remember," she told her troops via the communication network, "we don't stand and fight. We hit, we move. We hit again. Corvan teams, you're our anchor. When we draw the enemy to you, make them pay. Velen scouts, you're our eyes. Find the weak points. Humans, we're the chaos. Keep them confused." Her first target was a Ravager landing zone in the colony's industrial sector. The enemy had just finished unloading 3 pods worth of troops when Heejin's unit struck. Human soldiers appeared on rooftops and in windows, firing precisely aimed shots. Ravager units turned to respond, but the humans had already displaced to new positions. The Ravagers began advancing toward the buildings. Corvan warriors emerged from ground level, their massive frames blocking the streets. They opened fire with heavy weapons, stopping the Ravager advance cold. As the enemy focused on this new threat, Velan scouts infiltrated from side passages, targeting Ravager command units with surgical precision. The landing zone dissolved into chaos. Ravager units, designed for straightforward assault, struggled against an enemy that attacked from everywhere and nowhere. Zone 1 neutralized, Heejin reported. Moving to Zone 2. This pattern repeated across the battlefield. Mixed units used combined tactics that no single species had ever developed. Humans provided unpredictability and innovation. Velans provided reconnaissance and precision. Korvans provided strength and resilience. Together, they were more effective than any could have been alone. But the Ravagers kept coming. For every landing zone destroyed, 2 more activated. The defenders were skilled and coordinated, but they were still outnumbered. In orbit, Yuna faced the same problem. The combined fleet fought brilliantly, but the Ravager numbers were overwhelming. Ships began taking damage. Casualties mounted. Admiral, Sarloon reported, voice tight with stress. Projections show we cannot hold the planet at current attrition rates. We're trading at favorable ratios, but they have too many ships. Yuna studied the tactical display. Sarloon was right. The mathematics were brutal. At this rate, they would lose. But she remembered her training. Human military philosophy had taught her something that traditional galactic doctrine missed. Sometimes, the solution wasn't to fight harder, but to change the fight entirely. All ships, new orders, execute Taemin Gambit. The fleet suddenly disengaged, pulling back from the Ravagers. To traditional military thinking, this looked like a retreat, possibly the beginning of a rout. The Ravagers, driven by their hive programming to pursue and destroy, accelerated after the retreating fleet. They abandoned their careful formations, chasing what appeared to be a broken enemy. Yuna watched them come. Now, she said quietly, the retreating fleet suddenly reversed course. But they didn't come alone. Ships that had been hiding throughout the system, positioned days ago, emerged from behind moons and asteroids. Automated weapons platforms that had been drifting dead, activated. Minefields that had been invisibly dispersed, detonated. The Ravager fleet found itself in a carefully prepared kill zone, attacked from every direction simultaneously. Ships that had seemed to be retreating were suddenly their destroyers. It was an ambush on a massive scale. Using deception and preparation in ways the Ravagers' hive intelligence couldn't predict. Within minutes, the space battle's momentum shifted. On the ground, Taemin watched orbital fire missions strike Ravager positions with new intensity. Ki-jun, order all units to increase pressure. The Admiral has given us an opening. Let's use it. The ground forces, which had been fighting defensively, suddenly went on the offensive. Mixed units that had been harassing now attacked. Positions that had been strong points became launching sites for assaults. A Ravager command center, buried deep in a captured section of the colony, found itself under attack by a combined force led by Sergeant Hyun-sik. His special operations team included humans, Velans, and even 2 Corvan shock troops who had volunteered for the mission. Stack on the door, Hyun-sik whispered. His team moved into position, each soldier knowing their role without needing detailed orders. The Corvan warriors would breach. The humans would clear. The Velans would secure. Breach. The door exploded inward. The team flowed through like water, each member covering sectors, engaging targets, moving as one organism despite being 3 different species. The Ravager command center fell in 90 seconds. With it went coordination for 3,000 Ravager ground units. Across the battlefield, similar actions repeated. Human tactics, enhanced by alien capabilities, proved devastating. The Ravagers, for all their numbers and ferocity, had never faced anything like this. In orbit, the combined fleet completed its destruction of the Ravager swarm. Yuna allowed herself a small smile as the last enemy capital ship exploded. All units, Begin search and rescue operations. Priority to disabled ships. Regardless of species, Corvash approached her, his massive form moving carefully in the human-sized spaces of the bridge. Admiral. That was. I have no words. We trained for 3 months, but I never truly believed it would work in real combat. It almost didn't, Yuna admitted. We made mistakes. Lost ships and people we shouldn't have. But we adapted. We learned. That's the human contribution to galactic warfare. Not that we're better, but that we never stop improving. On the surface, the battle wound down. Remaining Ravager forces, cut off from coordination and outnumbered by now, were methodically eliminated. Captain Heejin's unit secured the last major enemy position as colonial dawn broke. She looked at her troops, exhausted, wounded, but alive. Humans, Velans, and Korvans sat together, sharing water and field rations, helping treat each other's injuries. 3 months ago, they had been strangers. Now they were brothers and sisters in arms. 2 weeks later, the Galactic Council convened in formal session. High Chancellor Mordak stood before the assembled representatives, his ancient voice carrying weight. The defense of the outer colonies was successful. The Ravager incursion has been repelled. This council recognizes the extraordinary contribution of all forces involved. He paused. But we must also recognize that this victory was achieved through methods and coordination previously unknown to galactic military operations. Admiral Yuna stood with General Taemin and Ambassador Nari. They wore their uniforms, bearing the marks of recent combat. Fleet Admiral Yuna, General Taemin, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I offer formal recognition of humanity's military capabilities. You have proven yourselves not as students, but as teachers. Not as children, but as equals. Counselor Vextar stood. His earlier arrogance was gone, replaced by something else. Respect. I formally request that humanity establish a permanent military advisory council. Other species need to learn what you know. Not to become human, but to improve ourselves through your experience. Thelvan added, the combined training programs should be expanded. Every species here can benefit from integration training. We should create mixed units permanently, not just for emergencies. Ambassador Nari stepped forward. The Council honors us. But humanity learned as much as we taught during this campaign. Admiral Korvash's strength saved human ships multiple times. Commander Sarloon's precision prevented friendly fire incidents. Colonel Clearthought's defensive doctrine protected key positions. She looked around the chamber. This victory wasn't human. It was galactic. We succeeded because we combined our strengths and covered each other's weaknesses. That's the real lesson. None of us are as strong as all of us together. Mordak's compound eyes gleamed. Well spoken, Ambassador. Perhaps humanity's greatest contribution is not your tactics or training, but your reminder of something we forgot. Diversity is strength, and cooperation is survival. The Council voted unanimously. Humanity would establish military advisory positions. Combined training would become standard. Mixed units would be tested and expanded. The galactic military would be transformed, not into a copy of human forces, but into something new. A true combined force that honored each species' strengths. Later, in a quiet observation lounge, Taemin found Vextar again. The counselor stood watching the stars, much as Taemin had done months earlier. General, Vextar said without turning. I wanted to thank you. For what? For being patient with my arrogance, for not holding grudges, for teaching us even when we didn't want to learn. He finally looked at Taemin. During the battle, a human medic risked her life to rescue me when I was wounded. She didn't hesitate, didn't consider that I had insulted her species. She just saved me. That's who we are, Taemin said simply. We fight hard, but we fight together. And we never leave anyone behind. Your people have suffered so much to learn these lessons. War after war, Tragedy after tragedy. Vextar's voice was quiet. I hope that by sharing your knowledge, we can all avoid paying such terrible prices in the future. That's the hope. Taemin agreed. We can't undo our history, but maybe we can make it mean something. Maybe our hard-learned lessons can spare others the same pain. Taemin. Well, Taemin agreed. Taemin. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, new threats might be waiting. But now, the galaxy faced them together, united by battle and strengthened by diversity. Humanity had shown them not how to be human, but how to be better versions of themselves. And in return, the galaxy had shown humanity that they were no longer alone. The combined forces had faced the Ravagers and won. But the real victory was simpler and more profound. They had become one people, many species, united in purpose, and strengthened by respect. The demonstration had shocked the galaxy. The battle had convinced them, but the future they built together would be their true legacy.